I built my dream cabin on a peaceful lakeside community. It was my sanctuary, a retreat from the chaos of everyday life. One morning, I arrived to find my cabin reduced to rubble. The HOA claimed it was because I had failed to pay HOA fees. But the truth? They never sent notices. They fabricated records, and they assumed I'd be too powerless to fight back. What they didn't know was that my entire family works in federal law enforcement. My brother is FBI, my sister is with Homeland Security, and my cousin is with the Department of Justice. We weren't just outraged, we were legally equipped. Within weeks, investigations uncovered misuse of funds, illegal demolitions, and fraud within the HOA board. They had targeted multiple homeowners, strong-arming them with bogus fees and threats. The same arrogance that made them demolish my cabin became the rope that hung their entire operation. By the end, not only were charges filed against the corrupt board members, but the HOA itself was dissolved. My cabin will be rebuilt, stronger than before, and the lesson is clear. Unchecked power will always crumble when held against justice.
Homeowners associations, commonly referred to as HOAs, were originally designed with good intentions. They were created to maintain shared spaces, protect property values, and foster a sense of community by enforcing basic standards that everyone in the neighborhood agreed to when moving in. However, in many cases, these organizations begin to accumulate power that goes unchecked, and instead of serving homeowners, they end up controlling them in ways that can feel overbearing and even abusive. The abuse of HOA power often begins subtly. At first, it might be something as simple as a fine for leaving a trash can visible too long, or a letter demanding the homeowner repaint their front door because the color isn't approved. Over time, however, HOAs in some communities move from being a helpful organization into becoming something more like a private government, with the ability to levy fines, restrict activities, and even pursue extreme actions such as foreclosures or demolitions, all without the same oversight or safeguards that actual government agencies must follow. One of the most concerning aspects is how easily HOA boards can misuse their authority, because they are often run by a small group of people who may have personal agendas or biases. These boards are not always made up of professionals with legal or financial expertise. Instead, they are neighbors who happen to volunteer or campaign for positions of control. When individuals with limited knowledge of fair governance gain power over others' homes and property, the potential for misuse becomes very real. A common form of abuse is the imposition of arbitrary fees and fines. For example, a board may charge residents hundreds of dollars for supposed violations that were never clearly explained in the community rules. Sometimes, homeowners are not even properly notified before penalties are issued, creating a cycle where residents are constantly in debt to the HOA without understanding why. This lack of transparency allows the association to collect money unfairly and intimidate those who might otherwise stand up to challenge the system. The legal powers of HOAs make this issue even more troubling. In many states, HOAs have the ability to place liens on properties if fees are not paid, and in some extreme cases, they can initiate foreclosure proceedings. This means that over a relatively small amount of money, a family could lose their home to an organization that was originally supposed to protect the value of that very home. The imbalance of power is striking. The HOA board can act swiftly to penalize or threaten, but homeowners often have to endure lengthy and costly legal battles to protect their rights. Many people simply give in, paying whatever the HOA demands because the cost of fighting back is too great. The abuse of power is not only financial, but also psychological. HOAs can make residents feel like they are constantly being watched and judged, creating an environment of fear and tension rather than one of community and belonging. This undermines the very purpose of shared neighborhoods. People buy homes in communities because they want stability and comfort, not because they want to live under the constant threat of penalties or, in extreme cases, the destruction of their property. Education is the most important tool to combat these abuses. Homeowners must understand their rights under state law and the governing documents of their community. Many people sign HOA agreements without reading the fine print, unaware of the authority they are granting to the association. Being informed can prevent misunderstandings and give residents the confidence to challenge unfair practices. Furthermore, communities should encourage transparency and accountability in HOA leadership. Board members should be reminded that their role is one of service, not of domination. When the lines between helpful oversight and harmful control are crossed, HOAs stop being protectors of property values and start being threats to personal freedom and financial stability. In short, the abuse of HOA power illustrates how organizations can drift away from their original purpose when authority is left unchecked. What should be a cooperative effort to maintain neighborhoods can become a source of stress, financial loss, and even injustice. Homeowners must stay vigilant, informed, and willing to demand fairness, because without resistance, power that is unchecked inevitably grows into power that is abused.
When corruption takes hold within a homeowners association, the impact can ripple far beyond simple fines or disputes over lawn care. The consequences of corruption are wide-ranging, touching financial stability, community trust, legal integrity, and even personal well-being. Unlike government agencies, which are subject to oversight, transparency rules, and avenues for appeal, HOAs often operate with minimal scrutiny. This creates an environment where dishonest board members or leaders can manipulate the system for personal gain. The results of that corruption can be devastating for individual homeowners and entire communities. One of the most common consequences is financial exploitation. When an HOA board becomes corrupt, it can misuse association funds, overcharge residents, or invent fees that were never part of the governing documents. Homeowners may be billed for repairs that were never performed, charged for late fees on payments that were submitted on time, or pressured into paying for services that do not benefit them. The money collected under false pretenses often disappears into mismanaged budgets, or in worse cases, into the pockets of corrupt board members. This not only robs families of their hard-earned money, but also undermines the financial health of the entire neighborhood, since funds that should be invested in common areas are instead misused. Beyond money, corruption erodes trust. A community functions best when neighbors feel that decisions are being made fairly and transparently. When an HOA becomes corrupt, homeowners quickly learn that rules are applied unevenly. Some residents might be fined heavily for small infractions, while others, often friends or allies of the board, are allowed to violate the same rules without consequence. This double standard breeds resentment and divides the community. Instead of fostering unity, the HOA becomes a source of conflict, creating an atmosphere where neighbors feel more like adversaries than partners in a shared living space. Once trust is broken, it can take years to repair, and in many cases, the sense of community never fully returns. Another significant consequence of corruption is the legal fallout. Corrupt boards often overstep their legal boundaries, issuing penalties or taking actions that violate state laws or the association's own governing documents. In extreme cases, this can include foreclosing on homes or, as in rare but shocking incidents, demolishing properties without proper legal grounds. Such actions open the HOA to lawsuits, investigations, and in some cases, criminal charges. However, homeowners often lack the resources or knowledge to fight back effectively. The imbalance between an organized board with access to attorneys and an individual homeowner trying to defend their rights makes the legal battle exhausting and expensive. Even if homeowners eventually win in court, the emotional toll and financial strain can be overwhelming. Corruption also undermines the purpose of the HOA itself. Associations are meant to protect property values by ensuring neighborhoods remain orderly and appealing. But when corruption takes over, the opposite occurs. Potential buyers hear stories of unfair practices, legal battles, and community disputes, which makes the neighborhood less desirable.
Property values can actually decrease as the reputation of the HOA worsens. Instead of serving as a steward of community value, the corrupt HOA becomes a liability to every homeowner tied to it. The human cost of corruption should not be overlooked either. Families caught in battles with a corrupt HOA often experience stress, anxiety, and a deep sense of helplessness. A home is supposed to be a safe and stable place, but when an HOA abuses its power, that sense of security is shattered. Constantly worrying about new fines, unexpected fees, or threats of legal action creates a hostile living environment. The emotional strain can spill over into relationships, work, and overall quality of life. What was once a dream home in a dream community can quickly turn into a nightmare. Ultimately, the consequences of corruption in HOAs remind us why accountability and oversight are so critical. When people in positions of power operate without transparency or checks, abuse is almost inevitable. For homeowners, the best defense is education, participation in board meetings, and collective action to hold leaders accountable. For policymakers, there is a need to ensure state laws provide adequate protections for homeowners against corrupt practices. Without those safeguards, corruption will continue to harm families and communities, turning what should be a system of support into a tool of exploitation.
Knowledge and justice are powerful tools when confronting organizations that overstep their boundaries, and nowhere is this more evident than in situations involving homeowners associations. Many homeowners enter into HOA agreements without fully realizing the extent of the power these associations hold, or the protections that the law grants them as individuals. The imbalance of power often exists because homeowners are unaware of their rights, while HOA boards take advantage of this lack of knowledge. However, when knowledge is combined with the mechanisms of justice, whether through courts, regulators, or law enforcement, the tide begins to turn, and abuses of power can be brought to light and corrected. The starting point is education. Knowledge equips homeowners with the ability to recognize when an HOA is acting outside of its legal authority. Governing documents such as covenants, conditions, and restrictions, or CC&Rs, bylaws, and state statutes spell out both the powers and the limitations of an HOA. Many residents do not take the time to study these documents, assuming the board will always act in good faith. This assumption leaves people vulnerable. A well-informed homeowner, however, can point out when a board attempts to enforce rules that are not actually written, or when fees are imposed without proper authorization. This knowledge provides the first line of defense against unfair practices. When homeowners are empowered with information, they are less likely to be intimidated. HOAs often rely on threats of fines, liens, or legal action to pressure compliance, and these threats can seem overwhelming to someone who does not know their rights. Yet many of these threats are exaggerated or even baseless. For instance, an HOA may claim it can foreclose over small unpaid fees when state law sets strict limits on such actions. Knowing the law prevents residents from being coerced by fear. It also shifts the balance of power, forcing boards to operate within the legal framework rather than exploiting ignorance. Justice comes into play when knowledge alone is not enough to stop misconduct. In cases of severe abuse, homeowners may need to turn to the legal system or law enforcement for protection. Courts can serve as a check against HOA overreach, reviewing whether the board has followed proper procedures or violated statutory rights. Regulators and government agencies can also intervene if fraud, embezzlement, or other criminal activities are discovered within an association. While the legal process can be slow and costly, it ensures that boards cannot act with impunity. Justice creates accountability, reminding HOA leaders that they too must answer to higher laws and standards. The power of knowledge and justice is amplified when homeowners unite.
An individual may feel isolated when confronting a powerful board, but when multiple residents share information and stand together, the board's ability to intimidate weakens. Collective action not only makes it easier to challenge unfair rules, but also increases the chances of success in legal proceedings. It also fosters a culture of transparency, where board members know their actions will be scrutinized by an informed community. Knowledge in the hands of many becomes a shield that protects everyone, not just those willing to fight alone. The presence of justice also acts as a deterrent to future misconduct. When corrupt board members face consequences, such as removal from office, civil penalties, or even criminal charges, it sends a clear message that abuse of power will not be tolerated. This encourages future leaders to act more responsibly and ethically, knowing that oversight mechanisms exist. In this way, justice not only addresses individual cases of abuse, but also strengthens the system for the long term. Ultimately, the combination of knowledge and justice restores balance. Homeowners gain confidence knowing that they are not powerless, and associations are reminded that their authority is not absolute. An HOA functions best when it serves the collective good, not when it operates as a private regime. By understanding the rules and trusting in the mechanisms of justice, communities can reclaim their original purpose: to maintain harmony, protect property values, and foster a safe environment for everyone. The lesson is clear: knowledge exposes the truth, and justice ensures that truth prevails.
The bigger lesson to be learned from stories of homeowners battling against abusive homeowners associations is not just about one individual winning against an unfair board. It is about recognizing the dangers of unchecked authority and understanding the importance of accountability in every organization, large or small. Communities thrive when leaders act with integrity, transparency, and fairness. They crumble when power is abused, rules are manipulated, and residents are treated as subjects instead of stakeholders. The struggles that homeowners face against corrupt HOAs highlight broader truths about human behavior, governments, and the need for vigilance. One of the central lessons is that power, no matter how small or local, can be misused if it is not balanced by accountability. An HOA board is not a government body, yet in many neighborhoods it has more direct control over residents' daily lives than local officials. It can dictate how homes look, what residents can build, and even how properties are used. Without oversight, this authority can be twisted into a weapon of control. The lesson here extends beyond HOAs. Whenever a group or individual has unchecked influence over others, there is a risk that it will be abused. History shows that whether it is a government, a corporation, or a neighborhood board, the temptation to exploit power is always present. Another lesson is that ordinary people have more strength than they may initially believe. Many homeowners assume that because the HOA has official-sounding titles and legal documents, there is no way to fight back. But time and again, when residents educate themselves, organize collectively, and hold leaders accountable, they discover that the balance of power can shift. The bigger lesson is that authority only works when people allow it to go unchallenged. When citizens, whether in a nation or a small community, demand transparency and fairness, they force systems of power to respect their boundaries. The importance of community itself is also part of the bigger lesson. HOAs were meant to unite neighborhoods, but when they turn corrupt, they often divide them. Yet, in resisting corruption, communities often rediscover their strength. Neighbors who once felt isolated come together with shared purpose, whether by signing petitions, attending board meetings, or supporting each other in legal challenges. This teaches that solidarity is a powerful force. Alone, one voice can be silenced. Together, many voices can bring change. The lesson extends far beyond property disputes. In every aspect of society, unity among ordinary people is often the strongest counterbalance to concentrated power. Transparency emerges as another core principle from these struggles. When organizations hide information, refuse to explain decisions, or silence dissent, corruption flourishes. The bigger lesson for all communities and organizations is that openness is not optional. It is essential. Transparency builds trust, prevents misuse of authority, and ensures that leaders serve those they represent. Whether in an HOA, a workplace, or government, secrecy almost always leads to abuse, while openness invites fairness and accountability. Finally, there is the lesson of resilience. Homeowners who lose money, face harassment, or even see their properties wrongfully taken or damaged often endure enormous hardship. Yet many of them fight back, rebuild, and use their experiences to help others. Their resilience shows that while systems of power can cause harm, they cannot erase determination. This resilience often inspires reform, whether through new state laws protecting homeowners, court rulings limiting HOA's reach, or community-driven efforts to create better governments. The bigger lesson is that injustice may win battles, but persistence, knowledge, and collective action can ultimately win wars. Taken together, these lessons remind us that the fight against HOA corruption is not simply about property disputes. It is about fairness, justice, and the principles that make communities strong. Abuse of power is not unique to HOAs. It is a human problem that appears wherever authority exists. The real takeaway is that people must remain vigilant, informed, and united in demanding integrity from those who lead. When they do, corruption collapses, communities heal, and justice prevails. The bigger lesson is that no matter how powerful an organization may seem, it can never withstand the combined strength of truth, knowledge, and collective resolve.